keynote part of our presentation today. And I'm so honored to introduce Julie, one of our council members who's gonna be giving a presentation today. She joined the council in the fall of last year, and she's currently the co-chair of our policy committee. She has long been deeply involved in community efforts to help preserve and further the land. Outside of participating in the Food Council, she likes to visit Waimea Valley and participate in the Hanai Ana or Aina conservation program. She hopes to continue the movement for a healthier, more sustainable Hawaii throughout her time on the council. So could everybody give a warm welcome to Julie?
Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. If you don't know already, my name is Julie, and I'm currently a senior at Hawaiʻi Schools, and I'm also a very proud member of the HYFC. In addition to being a member, I'm also co-chair of HYFC's policy committee, as is Tyler, who is also here, and I am so honored to be able to give my 2 cents during the summit, and I hope that everyone is able to walk away from the summit having learned something or gotten something meaningful or useful out of it. Just making sure. Can everyone hear me? Okay, great. So moving along with my actual speech, I'd like to briefly discuss the importance of food. And obviously that's a very broad topic. I understand that, there's many facets and aspects to that topic. So I'll just be focusing on the importance of food in our culture, primarily in our state, and why we should be pushing for change. Because if you can't really back up your actions or stances, that can create some problems and even possibly weaken your argument. And, we don't want that. Food is obviously a necessary part of life, and it's also what determines our health, both as individuals and as a community. And so our health as individuals will impact the health of the community because we are a part of that community. And so we need to take care of ourselves, to not only take care of ourselves, but also others. And so although food and health concern all demographics, I'd like to focus primarily on adolescents, which I know lots about, and, just during my time of speaking, talk about the role that they play in the community. And so as much as I hate to say it, adolescents are some of the most unhealthy demographics nowadays, which isn't entirely their fault. Of course, it is our decision to choose what we eat, so some of the fault does fall on us, but some of the fault also falls on society. Many companies, especially those that promote unhealthy products and lifestyles, they market specifically to younger demographics, and therefore, by extension, since adolescence usually calls for influence, many youths fall victim to targeted strategic marketing strategies. And so, of course, not everything marketed towards adolescents and youths and younger adults are bad, but a good portion of advertisements usually don't promote healthy lifestyles. And in addition to companies' marketing strategies, unhealthier food in general just tends to be a lot more affordable for people, and so it's much more attractive. And so that leads me to my next point, which is that economic inequality plays one of the largest roles in unhealthy food consumption, not just in Hawaii, but globally. It's not a secret that food insecurity is a largely prevalent issue throughout several communities. And in fact, approximately 1 in 6 people in Hawaii is at risk for food insecurity. And this is why I believe that schools have such a strong potential to change the food culture, especially in our state. The state is not exactly a big one. It is spread out, but it's still quite tight-knit, and making change is a very feasible thing. Creating a better, healthier food culture within schools can create astounding, lasting change within our community. And even if it's just by providing one healthy meal a day, it can create a really big change that can possibly create change outside of school, and maybe at the home, or in friend groups, or just in different areas. And so not only that, but also encouraging and providing education on health and food, and even Hawaiian food culture, something like that. Providing education on health, whether it be yours, the communities, as I said earlier, those are kind of interconnected, and the health of our environment all play crucial roles in promoting a healthy culture. And so that's kind of just my brief 2 cents on food and the importance of it, and why we should be focusing on creating change instead of continuing accepting what we already have and just continuing on with it.
So it is my honor to introduce our next keynote speaker, Mr. Kamuela Enos, who has done lots of work within Hawaii food systems. He has previously worked with Ma'o Farms, and currently he's with the University of Hawaii. So everyone, please join me in giving a warm welcome to Mr. Enos.
Aloha all. Really nice to be here today. Yeah, I'm really excited to be able to talk to youth about food. As a former youth myself, I think it's really important that we be grounded. So I have a quick presentation I just want to run through. I put together earlier today about what is my journey through food and the things that being raised in a healthy food system and being raised by family members that really wanted me to be engaged with my food system has allowed for me and the things I can do for my community and my family. Does that sound good? Awesome. I like to hang out with youth that want to talk about food at 5:30 in the afternoon on a Friday. We're all peeps. Okay. This is my presentation. I'm going to start from the beginning. Oh, okay. Anyway, my name is Kamuela Enos. I am born and raised in Makaha Valley on Waiʻanae many years ago. And I was raised with family in the 80s and 70s that were occupying land and growing food in a Hawaiian way. So, you know, if people think about Waiʻanae now and they think about, oh boy, all kind of drama and all kind, but you know, yeah. And also there is a lot of really cool things happening in the community because of all of that drama and all of the things that came there. And a lot of the drama that lives in communities like Waiʻanae is dramas that started a long time ago, but weren't always there. The poverty we see in our communities is recent. And there was times in Hawaii when the people were completely self-sufficient. And I was really lucky to be raised with the family that believed that and kind of put me to work. So this is my classroom growing up. This is in the back of Waiʻanae, Ka'ala Farms. And my father and a bunch of men, women, all these different genders, class, creeds, got together to love land. And they went and cleaned out all this old haole and illegally brought water down and started growing kalo. And everybody's like, what are you doing? You shouldn't be doing that. This was the 70s. It was super not cool to be Hawaiian and do growing kalo stuff then. But my dad, them didn't care. And I was the eldest grandson of the family. And I was riding shotgun with my dad as they were doing this as a little kid, wondering, why are all these angry policemen coming up to stop people growing? These are my teachers. My dad's in the middle. The two uncles on the side is Uncle Eddie Kanana and Uncle Walter Paulo. They're two native Hawaiian fishermen and farmers that came to teach our family how not only to grow food, but to grow fish and how to live intact. And that grumpy looking guy with that blue striped shirt, that was me when I was a little kid, having a clean collar. And I was super conflicted about it at that time because the work was really hard. It's easy to romanticize growing food, but boy, when you got to do it, you know, it takes a lot of work and it takes a lot of people. But that was my life growing up. And I really learned to love it. But when you grow food in a way that you're feeding people and you're trying to feed community first, you start to see some inherent injustices in the system. So I went to Waiʻanae High School and I had a hard time reconciling all the injustices I saw in the system with the things that I was seeing in the back of the valley when we were in places where you were caring for land and each other. So this is me. This is right before I dropped out of high school. If you find the annual at Waiʻanae High School, class of 1991, you won't see any graduate pictures, but if you open the whole photo up in a class stand in the back. There's this guy with a sign that says "die." That's what it clicked. And that was really how angry I was. And I think for youth, you have the you have the responsibility to be really angry. You have to be like, hey, like, these are the things that aren't right. But you also have the responsibility to take that anger and have it become something more than anger. Have it become a fire, have it become something that guides you and eventually turns into something healing. And that was kind of my journey. Dropped out of high school, was super angry for a long time because ultimately, there are a lot of reasons why I dropped out. But the core was I couldn't reconcile what I saw as a kid and I knew to be right with the society around me and what people were telling me at schools and everything at the time. Pro tennis courses, fine, golf courses in my pro hotels. And I was like, it didn't make sense. I basically gave the system a censored finger and then I dropped out. But then I found out though that anger doesn't translate to anything if it's not strategic, and it doesn't carry you and it doesn't care for you. So luckily I was able to be supported to go to college. So I went and got my bachelor's in Hawaiian studies and my master's in urban and regional planning at UH Manoa as a Waianae high school dropout, because a lot of people believed in me. And I think I was allowed to figure out how to do those hard things because I was trained to do hard things with care as a kid. And that's what land and farm teaches you. So after I came back, I had a chance to be like, okay, what does it mean to be post-angry? I'm done with angry. I want to do something else. I want to be committed. And I was lucky enough to work at Ma'o Farms. So after getting my master's, I spent 11 years working at the farm. If you're not familiar with Ma'o, where you been? Nah. If you're not familiar with Ma'o, it was a humble organization created by community members to link. What is that quiz? I wasn't on it, but you're playing the questions. Was it yours was playing? You have to put that. What was the name of it? We're just playing it. The Quizle game or something. The question I have. What is the two most important part of any community? Your arable land and your youth, right? That we link the two most important parts of our community together to recreate agency. As a farmer, I learned this quote. I'm not going to swear to a bunch of youth, but I'll use abbreviations to turn BS into fertilizer. Because BS can be turned into fertilizer if you process it the right way. And the more the BS, the more the opportunity for fertilizer. But the more you have to think about what is that process. And we took all the BS we saw and how would you say, like the poverty, the lack of opportunity, the narratives about what youth Hawaiʻi could do, the narrative about farming, that farming can't be something that people want to do and all of that. A lot of fertilizer. And we put it through a process of organic farming and sending youth to college. And through that, we began to grow. These are my mentors. That's Uncle Yeong. He was the kupuna of the valley. Santi Kukui, she is one of the founders, along with their husband Gary, the founders of Ma'o that allowed me to come home and work. And that is Koe and Parker. When I first started in 2008, they started with me. I just come out of college and they had just graduated from high school. And now they run the farm and they manage people. And they were so good that they kicked me out of the farm. I had to find a new job because they needed to take the place of leadership that we held for them. So that journey and anger of going from turning BS into fertilizer allowed me now to do my new job. Oh, I got this back. Well, these are some things we've created, right? within this model farms, but in that space, we're able to create a full-fledged college. My slides are out of sequence, so this, I'm going to go back and forth. A full-fledged college degree at the University of Hawaiʻi West Oahu, the baccalaureate degree. If you're interested in this, there's a full-fledged BA at UH West Oahu with Professor Albie Miles, who moved to Hawaii because he saw what was happening with community organizations. And these are the types of things that a love for land, kind of built around an anger at injustice, put together activities, you begin to grow then more than just food. And the gift for that is now I get to work at the University of Hawaii. So the University of Hawaii has created a full-fledged Office of Indigenous Innovation. So I work for the entire system. And in this office, we talk about how the ancestral practices of Hawaii are sciences and technologies. And sciences and technologies that were created over hundreds of years by people, sciences and technologies that are really specifically about how do you calibrate between the needs of people and landscape and bequeath abundance to the next generation. So the gift that's provided me is that now my kids get to grow up being grumpy at me, working and doing things on the land, and that cycle, now they're not so grumpy, but that cycle continues. So we kind of end where we began. As Hawaiians, we are the landscape. There is no word for environment in Hawaiian. We are the environment. And that is something I see as the youth in this group are the most important people on this island right now. Show me another 27 people that are more important than you, and I'll say, unless they're youth farmers. That's all. You guys are all in the same space. So thank you so much for inviting me to be here. I hope this was a sufficient pep talk. Remember, BS to fertilizer, and this is your kuleana now, and you have to tell us old farts to get out of the way. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Enos, and thank you also to Julie for sharing your wonderful perspectives. And I think we have a couple minutes for any questions. So if any of the people would love to ask questions, then please put your questions in the chat, and I'm sure our keynote speakers would love to answer your questions.
You did a wonderful presentation, Julie. I just wanted to let you know too.
Thank you. I really enjoyed yours right now.
Julie, come say hi. This is my daughter who's all gonna say hi, everybody. That's a good question, Julie. What should we prioritize?
What should we prioritize in Hawaii in terms of food? I think we should prioritize first localizing and regionalizing it, which, by the way, is our panel topic. So, you know, little sneak peek. But I think that that's really important because personally, before I didn't really know much about it, but after hearing Tyler talk and then kind of hearing like group discussions within HYFC, I learned that it's really important economically to localize and regionalize foods because it provides more like opportunities, and it just provides like leverage for domestic or, you know, producers in the state. And so I think that that's really important. I think we should also prioritize localizing, regionalizing food because it spreads awareness about Hawaiian culture. And, you know, as much as I hate to say it, I don't really know much about Hawaiian food. I don't know what dishes there are. I don't know like how it's produced. And so I feel like when there's a lack of education, there kind of is a lack of appreciation, which kind of just continues the cycle of not prioritizing the health of our land and our community and health. And so I think that's really important. And also when I got interested in HE, in like 7th or 8th grade, I took like science classes. I took life science and earth science. And although that's not necessarily agriculture and things like that, I got really interested in STEM and learning more about the world and the environment. So yeah, that's when I kind of started getting into that type of stuff.
An awesome response. I'm going to just try to jump in really quickly to some of the responses that came from me. Is okay, Julie? Yeah, thank you. For me, the barriers to young people entering food system and involvement, I think, is really the system itself valuing food systems. And that when we make it a priority across the board, government and all the different aspects, opportunities are created. And I also think that we try to do a model. We need to redefine what agriculture is, where it's something that is more than just the growing of a crop, but it's a growing of people, and invest in that whole cycle. Like our kupuna did it, making it fun. I think more opportunities to integrate this really cool mix of STEM, culinary, all these other things that you can teach through growing food that get people interested and excited. I think that can come if the broader system continues to see the value, increases and invests in that type of education. And I think the other part about hunters, absolutely, the hunters and fisher people are always going to be in Hawaiian, fisher person and like there's love and this idea, and even the farmer is mahi'ai, and in English it's a very different definition than in Hawaiian, because the mahi'ai doesn't mean farmer. Mahi is to be work, but it's also like mahi is that you have to fight, is to be. I've always kind of staunch in defense of food systems. You can scrap for the food, and you see it as a system, not just the crops. And the Vai'a were those that carried and fed the fish. Like, it was a whole cycle. So it was not just the extraction. It was this understanding of the generative cycles around that. When you frame it in those ways, people get really excited. And I think the fishers and hunters live that. And I'll say one thing to tell your parents, and there's a project I'm pushing through my office. Indigenous practices is a data science. And if you hunt and you fish, you're a data scientist. If you farm, you're a data scientist, and you're the most important type of data scientist, because you're not just publishing white papers for rich people or billionaires. You're using the data science that allows people to live. Super appreciate those questions. Thank you.
Okay, I think we have time for 2 more questions. Anyone want to take up one?
Julie's way smarter than me, so ask her all the questions.
Yeah, I put a question in this chat. This is Romeo, and I was asking about, and then Debbie connected something to it, about, are all islands suitable to grow all crops? Or there's some islands within the state that are more suitable for particular crops? And then we can, by utilizing that, that we can grow efficiently and share.
What do you think, Julie?
I'm not as knowledgeable on this as you might be, so I'm gonna sit this one out. But I'd love to hear. I'm very curious.
Yeah, I think that's what I think you're being shy, Julie. A lot of it, to me, is a key thing that is so critical is soil science and understanding what soil types. Like, Hawaii has some of the most diverse soil types in the whole world, right? Because Hawaii has almost every single aspect of it. But the other parts too is suitability has to be set alongside infrastructure and things like access, and also access to market, and all of these really complex things around growing food for market versus growing food for subsistence. But I think the part that excites me is the growing movement for people to reclaim their food systems and have these conversations with farmers, with policymakers, and with funders to start to think about how do we collectively do that kilo, as Debbie says, and look at all of the different ways that things play out. Yeah, I think The only climate that we don't have in Hawaii is there's a very specific one that someone way smarter than me can probably remember. But because we have all the tapu Mauna Kea, we have really interesting types of climates. Yeah, and I think the question about, I can introduce you, a bunch of you later if you're interested, to give you the email of one of my peers, Dr. Jonathan Dienek, who's the lead soil scientist at University of Hawaii, who lives in Waianae, and he is a farmer / soil scientist, and he loves soil. I think I'll put him on the spot for next meeting and kind of have him do a presentation of it. No soil, no farms.
I have a question. This is Grace. This is for Kamuela. So it's actually perfect that you touched on equity or like inequity that you saw in your high school experience, because that's what our panel later tonight is about. So I was hoping you could kind of just expand on that. And I don't know, I just wanted to hear more about that because I thought that was really interesting.
Yeah. I think in a nutshell, there's a lot of Hawaiians in Waianae and Waimanalo and Anahola, like the density of Native people in the spaces is because we were kicked off of where we used to live and put in homesteads. Before that, we were all over the state. Yeah, we're all over in each. Hawaiians were self-sufficient, not only on islands, but in their own valleys. And you never traded outside of your valley for everything you needed. And that deep understanding of how you relate to the landscape around you and how you grow food while you grow people at the same time was a system that was everywhere in Hawaii. And then this colonial forces came through and moved people out of that and replaced this circular farming system with an extractive one to work on a global supply chain. I think there's a lot of complexities in that, like Hawaiians like knocked other Hawaiians off, and it's like no group of people is perfect. And I think that is like a super dangerous thing to say. Like you have a perfect ancestors, like they were humans and they're fallible and they made some of the same, they all make the same types of mistakes, especially when power comes into play. But I will say the equity piece is to understand though, that there were systems that existed here for hundreds, if not thousands of years that allowed people to feed themselves and the communities at the same time. And that if you're not acknowledging those systems, when you're talking about restoring contemporary food systems and acting like sustainability began in America in the 60s or whatever, and then teaching people in Hawaii about sustain like that to me is an opportunity to question like, hey, how do we bring traditional practices into this space and well? And that is this understanding too that, you know, you need, for these things to grow, they need to be invested in. And equity is self-awareness. Equity is a willingness to address past wrongs, but it's also a willingness to, in that addressing of historical injustice, identify what is future opportunities. And you can't skip that part of the work, but you also can't stay forever and like, we were wronged. Like you need to find ways to get to that restoration. At the end of the day, the hallmark of Hawaiian people and all indigenous people, no matter where you're from in the world, everyone's indigenous to someplace. Just the people Hawaii, we're Hawaiians are indigenous to here, but you are actually genealogically rooted to people that were really good at living in place. And having a relationship with your landscape is part of not just your physical DNA, but your emotional one too. And that is like how equity for me is the identifying of historical injustice and then making it right by investing in restoration of practice so that people can have agency in their life again.
Thank you so much, Mr. Enos, and also thank you so much to my fellow council member, Julie, for all your insights. And unfortunately, we are out of time for questions, but thank you so much for your input. So everyone, let's give them another round of applause.
I put my email in the chat too, so people have more questions.